Okay, just a quick look. Last week or so I've had a new delivery in from my laser cutters and heat treaters. These is my first batch here of a stainless called N690. It's basically a European version. It's very close to VG10 in makeup. So I'm hoping this is going to be my general purpose stainless. Now, one of the best stainlesses we can use for knife making is RWL34. Okay, powder steel, extremely good in most applications. But if you're making batches, it's difficult to process because it only comes in strip. Okay, this is 3.5mm, 4mm, comes in 40mm wide. That's it. 50mm, 7mm comes in 50mm wide. That's it. You can buy it by the length. So it makes it difficult to put it on a laser cutter or a water jet cutter and cut it. You can do, but you've got to put each little piece in, so it gets very expensive. It's not really worth doing unless you've got a complicated shape that you can't easily generate by hand. So making for these is fine for one-offs, customs, where everyone's a bit different or whatever, but it's slow and expensive. So one of the steels I have been using that I can cut is this one at the back. This is 12C27 Sandvik steel, another very good stainless steel, generally used in lots of applications. This is one of the best stainlesses we've got for a Scandinavian edge. This one, 25° Scandinavian, takes a fine edge, very good for woodwork. As I say, stainlesses in general aren't going to be as good as carbon steels, so but the stainless application is useful in some places. As I say, it doesn't rust, it stays shiny. However, 12C27 isn't quite as good as a general purpose knife, and RWL does exceed it for stalking knives, bone, kitchen type knives, although 12C27 is used by a lot of makers of that type of knife. So looking around, Barmond, who I buy my steel off of, came up with some N690. As I say, it's a Öderholm steel. It's very close to VG10, and more importantly, it's got a good performance. Maybe not quite as good as RWL, you know, but definitely better than average. And it's available in sheets, so I can economically cut it. As I say, I can and do full custom knives, one-offs if you want, but there's lots of people out there doing that, and they do it very well. And in fact, if you want any recommendations, I'm quite happy to send you to some. What I do is a little bit different. It's handmade as much as possible. This saves a lot of messing around with an angle grinder. It doesn't really make any difference to the handmade as far as I'm concerned. Obviously other people have their own ideas on that. I have a set range of knife designs that I've come up with, and I do add to them from time to time. Some of them are based on customers' wants. The DSK, if you look on my website, there's a specific one for wisdom survival. These are a lot of ex-military guys, and they wanted a simple, basic, flat knife, no handle, just a small, easy, sharp knife that they can put in a survival tin, and is always there. So this is one of the designs that they had. I improved it slightly, changed it about, and they allow me to sell it as one of my knives, as well as buying it off me for their kits, which is very nice. A lot of the other knives I came up with just for me to try out because I was interested. Nesmuk, again, is a fairly standard knife in the bushcraft world, but if you're not used to knives, it looks a bit odd, so I had to make one and have a play with them. I quite like it, and this is my version of it with a standard handle. So that's where most of them come from. Other things I do, again, for batch processing in small quantities, you know, 10, 50 knives or something, or over a year, is make knife blades and things for other people. That's what these are. This is a stalking knife for a friend of mine, Dougster. I make the blades up. There's one that's half finished. It's got the grind on one side at the moment, just needs a probably final polish, and the other one's got to be put on. It's just had the corners knocking off. So he has these off me on a regular basis. It's the same knife, so it makes sense to get a batch cut. So he's got a big pile here of them, and he'll have 4 or 5 a month or something as he sells them off. He's got a couple of other here, different designs he's done for different people, for different purposes. A couple of new prototypes here for you, Doug. Rich, his call sign is Dougster, but his name's actually Richard, which is fine. He's got a couple of other different ones here. Same handle, different shaped blades for smaller game, I think. Again, because this sheet is 4.5mm, it's a bit thick for some of these. Unfortunately, we can't pick and choose to a certain extent. There are some limitations. You could buy a smaller sheet, but then you've got to cut a whole sheet of small knives. We can thin that down, we can put taper tangs on there, full flat grinds, lots of tricks we can play to take all the weight out. I've also wanted to try some of my stuff, so half of the sheet actually was cut for Richard's knives. The other half I've filled up with some of my designs, just again to try the steel. I wanted to try a large Camp Nessie. You don't generally make large knives out of stainlesses because stainlesses don't have the strength and toughness available. But I've seen quite a few knives made in N690 to a reasonable size, bigger than this even, and it can be tempered back to mid-50s Rockwell, again to help with the toughness. So that's what I've done on these. They're all heat treated the same to 150 degrees, 60 Rockwell. These ones I've re-tempered at home to take them back down to the mid-50s, and I'll put a full flat with a nice convex on these, I think. Good strong edge on it, and see how it works, just as an experiment. So there's 2 there to play with. I've done a selection of my other blades, but to save messing around, what I've done on these ones is I've done a combination blade profile. So this is what this rectangle is. The handle's all done because the handles on my knives generally stay the same, and I can now shape the front of this to several of the versions of my knives I've got. So this could be a standard DJP. It's mostly there, just got to take a little nick off the front, which is what it was based on. Or should fit DSP, he says, and let's get this right. Obviously we've got to take the top off and the bottom, and we can get that out of there, or in fact any other shape I feel like. It's a bit, it slopes down a bit too much for maybe for pucko, but you could probably pucko it a bit. We could put a tanto slash on the front with that nice straight edge. Lots of options, and for the longer versions I now do some blades with a bit of extra length on them. Exactly the same blade, handle shape, just that extra 3/4 to an inch length. Makes a bit of a difference, and it can always be made shorter again if you want to. So that saves me cutting 4 or 5 different patterns because there was only a certain amount of size on the sheet. So I've got half a dozen blanks of that. Some of my little neckers, again I like these in stainless. Small knives are good in stainless because you don't obviously put the hammer into them that the big knives get, so you want a nice sharp surgical blade there. As I said, a few DSKs, again these are quite chunky because of the 4.5mm material. In fact I think it's probably fatter than that. Yeah, it's just under 5mm thick. I say 4.5mm because it gives you some thickness to grind off, because there's a pitted surface on this from the rolling. So standard 01, 52-100 this one probably. As you can see there's a little bit more thickness in there. But again, we can grind that down, put a full flat on this maybe. As I say, I don't think the N690 is probably any good for a Scandinavian zero grind. I think it will chip out too easily, but a nice convex secondary on there should toughen it right up. Taper tangs, I like big taper tangs on some of my knives, so there's plenty of meat on there to get a nice looking taper on there. And maybe some paracord wraps. As I say, they're designed to be used without any handle at all, or I put thin scales on, fat scales. Other people have done various designs on them, but I've always shied away from paracord wraps, mainly because I was using carbon steel, and paracord obviously absorbs and holds water, which is going to be no good next to your carbon steel blade that you can't get at. So I think I can try some paracord wraps on here, maybe resin impregnate them, see what happens. As I said, I've had some 12C27 cut, and again these are 12C27 DSKs again. These will be Scandinavian edge. I've got some standard DWC bushcraft knives in that. Again, they can take a Scandinavian edge. I can do them in this in N690, but they would probably have a full flat to convex secondary or straight secondary, which might be quite interesting to try out. So at the moment it's grinding stainless for the next, well, till Christmas I suspect. I've got a few carbon steel ones to get out, and I'll be putting some I found around the shop. This one was an experimental one where I've taken a DJP and changed the profile slightly closer to a bushy, but again it's in 7mm, so it's a fairly chunky knife, but with the full flat and the skeleton it's actually probably lighter than a 4mm standard Woodlaw clone, woody blade, a lot stronger and far more comfortable for push cuts and things. So that's what we're up to at the moment. I'll see you next time.